and then we'll turn it over to Diane.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Bob.
Thanks. Thanks.
Hey, Chief, I got some questions from a friend of mine. Do you want me to ask those before the meeting starts or when we start the, who has board member comments and stuff?
Yeah, you can do them then.
Okay.
I assume they're about their police advisory board type questions.
More about your diet, lifestyle, yeah. Yeah, they're directly related.
Okay. What's that, Brad? Okay.
Okay, then we can probably call the meeting to order because it looks like we have everybody here. Angie, would you mind doing the roll call?
I will. Chair Lohman.
Present from a distance.
Vice Chair Foster.
Here.
Brian Dorsey.
Present.
Rich Miller. Well, I know.
Oh, yes, I'm here. I forgot to unmute. Sorry.
Okay. Bob Silverforb.
There.
Mike Smith.
Here.
Megan Thornton.
Here.
Chris West.
Here.
And Lori Zwingli.
Here.
Okay.
Somebody's got a lot of noise in the background.
Yeah, we need to, just as a reminder, everyone please mute when you're not speaking.
Okay, great. So that was everybody, right? So we will go into the approval of the minutes. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at the minutes, and do we have any comments or questions?
I reviewed the minutes, spent about 2 hours on them this afternoon, and they look good, and I move that they be approved as submitted.
Great, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
I'll second.
Okay, great. So the minutes are approved. Do you still coordinate, Angie, then with Ralph upon his no, you're going to be gone for a while. So do I need to do that then in Ralph's absence?
Yeah, I'll send you an email.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send you an email about it.
Great, thank you.
And Madam Chair, just for the sake of consistency, go ahead and call for a vote after the second.
Got it. Okay, thank you. All those in favor of the approval of the minutes, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Great, then we'll move forward with the minutes approval. The next item is the board chair announcements, and was trying to think who we started with last time, but let's go ahead and start with Ralph. Do you want to say anything, Ralph, for
I
announcements?
really have nothing tonight.
Okay, we'll move on to Brian.
I have nothing at this time.
Okay, Rich.
I do not have anything.
Bob. Bob, I believe you're muted.
How about now?
Perfect.
There was a segment on KGW about a week ago about body cameras for the Portland Police Department, and our chief was interviewed on there talking about Sherwood and our use of body cams by our department, and he did a great job. And I left there feeling that if he never made it in police work, he had a potential career in journalism. So good going, Chief. I also, there is a group called the Washington County Public Affairs Forum, and on February 22nd, next Monday, they're going to have a local law enforcement panel. And the chiefs from Tigard, Beaverton, and Hillsborough will be on this panel, and they'll be talking about a lot of things that we've discussed, like defunding the racial justice movement, ongoing complexities of navigating COVID-19. Anyway, it is at 12 p.m. Next Monday. I've attended a few of these, and they are extremely interesting. The people do a nice job that are featured. And anyway, I wanted you all to know about it in case you want to take a look at it like I will be. That's it, Diane.
Great, thanks, Bob. Mike, anything to share?
Yeah, I think I've mentioned in the past that I'm in the process of going through the FBI Citizens Academy, and classes are in session for that. Last night's program entailed presentations on Portland area gangs and also the FBI's Portland area bomb squad. And I will tell you that both of those topics just made me want to go crawl underneath the blanket and hide my head. And Chief, this isn't for you now, but maybe later. I don't know if we have any issues in the area with gangs or not, but it was terrifying, the number of gang-related issues and number of gang members that there are in the Portland area.
Well, I can respond very quickly and very briefly to that. And the answer, thankfully, is no. We have very little of that activity that spills southward in terms of gang activity. Now, some of those involved may make their way down here for other criminal conduct, but we do have a lot of criminal conduct from folks out of Portland, but nothing specific to gangs. We have, however, utilized the Portland bomb disposal unit a few times on for suspicious devices. So there you go.
Thanks, Chief. That's all I've got, Diane.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Megan?
Yeah, I have a few things. So, Chief, if you want to take notes and email me back or respond at this time, either is fine with me. Last week, a friend of mine that works at OHSU had a required training from the police that are on staff. So there are 6 officers at all times on OHSU. They are required to recite by memory their oath, and according to this presentation, they're, quote, the forefront in Oregon for policing strategy. That presentation that my friend attended led to the following 4 questions. Or actually, I guess I wrote them down twice. 3 questions. Lucky you, Chief. Number 1, OHSU has 4-point holsters for safety, as in like it's going to take longer to get your weapon drawn. So they wanted to know if we have in Sherwood 4-point holsters for safety. And then if you wanted to elaborate on that, that'd be great. The next question, and I can, or do you want to just take these one at a time? It'll probably be easier for you.
No, actually, why don't you just give me all 3 and then we'll go from there.
Okay, so 4-point holsters for safety, as in guns are drawn slower. Second point, is there an aggressive written strategic disengagement policy? So when I talked with my friend about this, I told them about the presentation you'd given at the chamber. I think it was January or February of last year, as well as what you've done for us on the board, as far as switching from like old school policing techniques of like, I'm going to grab your elbow and try to break your arm and just a ton of force, to more of the martial art, mixed martial art, stand off to the side, not yell at you, but talk with you and evaluate the situation. Is that $20 item being stolen worth the issue that would ensue from us pursuing that theft. So, and I sent them some of that stuff. So that, and then also, do we operate using a trauma-informed lens?
And so that's question number 3, trauma-informed lens.
Yep, those are all the questions. That's why I thought if you don't want to respond now, but want to email me, that I can just get back to that person, that's fine.
No, actually, I'll answer them now. I think the whole of the board would appreciate
Great.
getting it, and frankly, they're not difficult questions. And
Oh,
thank you
good.
for that. Number 1, safety
Like,
holsters.
oh no, someone says, you're on police advisory board yet? I have a few questions. I'm like, oh dear Lord. Okay, so
Yeah,
glad they're
no,
not
that's
hard.
good. So question number 1, the first clarification I would offer, well, before I answer the questions, let me just be very clear. I am not in the position, nor do I want to be in the position to contradict anything that another police department says or an opinion that they have about something. So that's my qualifying statement. My answers to these are going to be based on what Sherwood does.
Which is
And
the
that's not-
question.
What?
Which is the question. Does Sherwood have?
Yeah. And so I don't want anybody watching or in the meeting or that hears about this to interpret this to mean that somebody else is doing something wrong or whatever. These are just my positions. So safety holsters, we do deploy and issue safety holsters. It's important to understand from my perspective that safety holsters are intended to keep the gun in the holster when somebody else is trying to grab it. They're not designed to slow the draw of the officer down. That may be a secondary outcome, but just like anything else with practice, an officer will draw faster. I can tell you that I have a safety holster and I can draw my sidearm very quickly. And it's just a matter of practice. But we do, so the simple answer to the question is we do have safety holsters because we do not want our guns to be easily taken out of our holster by somebody else, that we don't want to have them in some kind of a tussle or fight or whatever the case may be.
And those are considered the 4-point.
Oh, there's multiple different levels. There's a level 1, level 2, level 3. So I don't know exactly what a 4-point
It was
means.
roll 4. That's what they were referring to.
Yeah. So you here again, I think ours are probably level 2s and 3s because you have to get to a certain point where if an officer needs his or her sidearm, they need to get it out of the holster. And some of them can have safety features that are counterproductive to being able to do that. So last thing I would ever want to have is an officer get shot or otherwise seriously injured because they weren't able to get their firearm out of their holster. So
Right.
From my perspective, as long as there's some kind of a retention device or safety device to keep somebody else from walking up and just pulling the gun out of the holster, which back in the day when I started, that's exactly how easy it was. You literally could walk up and grab the grip of the revolver or the semi-auto and with very little extra work, you could pull it right out of the holster. And we used to train on weapon retention. So when somebody grabbed your gun, you would take certain actions to prevent them. And now, while that's still important, we now have holsters that prevent that. So again, that we do not have those holsters so that it's harder for an officer to draw their gun, which is what I heard you relay from your friend. So these safety holsters are all about keeping other people from drawing them. So we don't have a level 4. I'm not even sure I knew there was a level 4, but regardless, I think ours are 2s and 3s.
Okay.
Second question, disengagement policy. Yeah, absolutely. So we've gone over our use of force policy multiple times.
That's
We're
what I
doing
thought.
it. We're doing it again tonight, and there is a. It's not called disengagement. It's called de-escalation. And one method of de-escalating is by disengaging and simply walking away. And so we teach multiple methods of de-escalation, or if you want to call it, well, I would say disengagement is just one method of de-escalation. So by definition, I would assume disengagement means you're going to unengage, you're going to walk away, you're going to, you're not going to proceed in whatever action is, whatever incident is going on. You're not taking any further action and you're leaving. And so that would be one method of de-escalating a situation. And we have, in fact, practiced that for several years. And I can give you a specific circumstance where we disengaged because the risk was not worth the potential outcome, and we walked away and addressed it in a different way. So the answer to that is yeah, absolutely. Number 3, trauma informed. This is probably a topic and a discipline that's come up just in the last few years. An improvement to policing and an improvement to how to approach victims and circumstances from a trauma-informed perspective. And I think in practice, it's been around for a long time. We just haven't defined it as trauma-informed, and we haven't explored it and dug as deep into it as we are now. But we do. When we train people how to speak with victims, we include now the ideology and the practice of coming at it from a trauma-informed position. So the example would be, it's an unpleasant example, but it's also one of the most, probably one of the examples people think of the most. You have a sexual assault victim. And so, like I said, in that arena for years, we've talked about, you don't just sit down with a sexual assault victim the way you would with a burglary victim and say, okay, tell me what time you think this happened. Can you give me some idea of what's missing? And you know what I mean? It's a much different, completely different interview. And in fact, we take specific steps to make sure domestic violence would be another situation when you're dealing with a survivor of domestic violence. We take intentional steps to provide specific targeted training and get people trained at a higher level so they can approach those appropriately. And another example actually is with children, right? And so the trauma-informed position when we're dealing with child victims oftentimes is not to interview them, because we want them to be interviewed by experts, specialists that deal with children and come at it from a trauma-informed position. So the answer to that is yes as well. So hopefully that covers those 3 questions for you. And I don't know, maybe somebody has a follow-up question.
The last question I forgot to say is our oath simplistic enough that officers can recite it by memory in any given situation?
No. And I have never, I'm not sure, I'd have to really stop and think of any time that I have heard of a police officer or police department requiring their folks to memorize the oath. If I have, it's maybe one person, and I'm not even sure that he suggested it, but he may have. But it's just not, from my perspective, it's certainly not what I would consider common. And I'm not, it's not one of those things that I would say, hey, you know what, I think we need to do that, because frankly, from my perspective, I want people to know what the oath says, but then it needs to be about behavior, not words, right? So you can walk into my office at any point and recite the oath of office. That's fine. But what I want more than that is I want you to live that oath every day in the field. And so we need to focus on making sure we hire the right people, train them, teach them our culture, and make them the police officers we want to be, so that they do that. And we've just not identified having them memorize the oath of office as a part of that.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Now I'm done.
Thank you.
I'll report
Great
back.
questions.
I thought they would be interesting too. I was like, well, I thought our aggressive written strategic disengagement policy was basically the manual that we've been going through where we're defining, this is okay and this is not. And in these situations, this is what you do. And that's what I described to my friend as far as, well, this is what I think is what we have, but I will ask specifically. So good to know I was mostly right on that.
No, I think you were right on.
Thanks.
And of course, I would be, I can't think of the word I'm looking for. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, I think you mentioned something about, in her training, they mentioned that they were how was it you put it?
Oh, according to the training, the 6 officers, the police force at OHSU are and this is like right out of their presentation, forefront in Oregon for policing strategy.
Okay. So thank you. I needed a reminder. So I would be remiss in saying that they are, that I don't disagree with that, and they're right with us at Sherwood PD.
I'll make sure she knows. Thanks.
Thanks, Megan. Chris, do you have any comments?
No, I saw the chief on KGW2, and it was awesome to show that we've been on top of this for a while.
Great, thanks, Chris. Lori?
So I have a question for the chief about that segment on KGW. Is that something that you could access and maybe funnel over to the police foundation?
The only access I have to that is while it's publicly available. So I'm not aware anymore these days of news moves and cycles through so fast. I don't know that we could get a copy of that, or it wasn't our story. Kylie Boshi reached out to me because we've known each other for several years from back in my PIO days, and he knew we had body cameras, and so he emailed me and said, hey, can you help me out on this story? And I said, I'd be glad to. So I don't know, Lori, but my sense is probably not. Most of the time, news channels, when they recycle those stories, they go to some record keeping company and then you have to buy them.
Okay.
At least that's the way it was years ago. I have no idea.
Okay. Well, we may have a conversation about that another time then.
Okay.
So my only announcement would be that the Police Foundation Gala is going to take place virtually on May 12, Wednesday, May 12. So mark your calendars because we're getting it up and running. That's it.
Great, thanks, Lori. So I guess then back to me. The only comment that I would say is that when I took my kiddos to their practice at the new high school, there was a patrol officer already patrolling the new high school. There's a number of kids already on campus for limited in-person distance learning. So cool that they're, in the building and safely right now, and there's already patrolling going on there. So thank you for that. And if there's no further comments from anyone, we'll move into the business section. The first item is the term expiration update. And Chief, do you have the information on this?
I do, and I don't think we included the spreadsheet in the packet. I don't think I did. Is that correct, Angie?
I'm sorry, what was that question?
I don't think I included the term limit spreadsheet in the packet, did I?
No.
Okay, so which is okay. So it's fairly simple. Mike Smith and Brian Dorsey are the only 2 of the 7 whose terms do not expire the end of June this year. So let me remind you of some background. So the Police Advisory Board was the newest board up until the Traffic Safety Committee was formed. And as a result of being a new board with 9 members, we ended up with, concurrent terms for everybody. And some of that started to happen in other boards. And so City Council cleaned up the ordinance to kind of improve the process and to also try to keep from the boards and commissions having to recruit for multiple members at the same time, or not being able to conduct business because they'd have too many members going off at the same time. So they created a different structure. And when you have that many people on boards and commissions, you can't just flip the switch and fix everything immediately, right? So what they did is they moved everybody's term expiration date to June 30th. That was number 1. So it's no longer dependent upon when you come on. It's always the expiration date of every term is going to be June 30th. If you come in midterm to replace somebody that resigned, then you will finish their term out and it'll end at June 30th, regardless of when you came on. Oh, my dog heard something. Okay, sorry for that. So then what they did is, knowing then that there would be multiple people that expired at the same time, they made the adjustment so then the subsequent terms are staggered. So we will next week email out to the full board just a reminder of what those next term expiration dates are, because some people have 1 more year, some people have 2 years, some people have 3 years in order to stagger them. Hopefully that makes sense. We're having some neighborhood issues here. The joy of virtual meetings. So here's the good news. There's no longer term limits, and the process for reappointment is a lot cleaner. So if anybody that expires on June 30th of this year, you can indicate a desire to be reappointed, and I think it'll happen. And then you'll have a new term limit, either 1, 2, or 3 years from that point on. Some of you haven't been on the board very long, but your term expired this year because you filled the position of somebody that resigned, and so you're just completing their term. So that's why, like Megan, for example, I don't think Megan's been on a full 3 years come this June, but she filled a resignation of somebody that would have. So that's how that operates. So I hope that makes sense. So 7 of you, your term expires June of this year. That's the 7 of you, except for Mike and Brian. I know it's Brian, and I think Mike was the newest member next to Brian. So Mike and Brian, you don't have to worry about reapplying, but any of the 7 of the rest of you, if you want to continue your service on this board, you can reapply. Some of you have been on the board for a few years, and you may decide that you don't want to reapply, and we'd hate to see you go, but certainly understand that. So if there's any questions about, hopefully I haven't muddied the waters on that, but let me know if there's any questions. I know it looks like Megan has a question.
Yeah, so my question is, if I said, okay, I want to re-up as of July 1, 2021, would I tell you I want a 1, 2, or 3 year term, or do you set that? Is that like something then if I said 1 year, I'd say next year I want to do it again or not, or how does that process work? And
That's
someone else's shoes, and I thought I had a full term. But that's
yeah. So that's a really good question. And the positions in all the boards are numbered. So for the Police Advisory Board, we have 9 positions, so 1 through 9. And those positions were all numbered without any reference or deference to any individuals. So those term expiration dates, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 years are staggered by position number. So it just was completely random in that way. So if you want, so to use your example, and I don't know when your expiration is after this year, but let's just say hypothetically it was for 2 more years and you didn't want to do 2 more years, but you wanted to do 1 more year. The simple solution to that would be to serve, and your first question is you would let me know. You just let staff know that you're interested in reapplying and being reappointed to the board. And then you serve your year and you can certainly step down if a year's enough or 18 months is enough or whatever. And somebody will then come in and complete the rest of your term. And then the process will continue, so on and so forth. Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, thanks. So we'll move then into the police policy updates.
All right, very good. It looks bigger than it is really, but there's not a whole lot of substance to most of these. But you have a new format that I'm beginning this month with a police policy update report. So you have in front of you now, in complete clarity, a document that talks about which policies are being updated, in what way they're being updated, and then you have each of those policies attached as an exhibit. This, by the way, is the same form that I will be using with, or that I have used and will continue to use with City Council. It's called a staff report, and I just kind of modified that to use the similar format with you all. Frankly, I think it's more informative and more efficient for you, and it's a lot more efficient for me and easier for me to organize these things. So you have that in front of you. So I'll just go through these various updates. First off, excuse me, and probably the biggest impact to the policy manual is it's been renumbered. So for those of you that have spent any time going through our policy manual, you've noticed that, say in chapter 3, because we're going to be in chapter 3 tonight, you'll notice that the numbering goes from 300 to 304 to 308 to 310 and there's spaces and skips. And primarily there's no odd numbered chapters. And what we learned from Lexipol was, I don't know for sure if that was intentional originally or not, but what we've learned is that they advised us that we should renumber the policy manual to provide clarity and just put it in a consistent order and eliminate those blank chapters. So we're doing that. We did that in conjunction with these other updates so that we could announce it and let people know. So once these updates are approved, first by you guys and then by City Council, the new policy manual, the updated policy manual will be posted online, and folks will realize that in chapter 3, it goes from 300, 301, 302, 304, so on and so forth in complete numerical order. The reason that's important that everybody understands that is if you're thinking about a policy that used to be 304, it could now be renumbered by several numbers depending on where it played out, right? Because if you have enough chapters skipped and then it gets moved up, its numbering could be completely different. So it's important that you know that that's coming. So that's first of all. Any questions on that before I move on? Second is chapter 100, law enforcement authority. And you'll notice in this chapter and several of the others, one of the changes that was done is Lexipol went in and updated state statute numbers or citations. So state statutes are all by number, like 311.110 is a specific statute. 419 point, so on and so forth. As statutes, as the laws are updated, changed, certain statutes are repealed and different things like that, those numbers change. And so obviously that's one of the things that Lexipol does for us. So they did that in several of these chapters, and in many of them, that's the only changes that they had, or the only updates that were made, was just to correct statutory reference numbers. So in chapter 100, Law Enforcement Authority, they corrected statutory number, and then they also replaced the term department with agency. So I think they're trying to do that throughout the policy now. So you will no longer see, or you'll see less often, a member of this department, and it'll say a member of this agency. So that's it for 100. Any questions? All right, 300, use of force. Again, we've obviously, and for good reason, spent a lot of time on this one. So again, 300 had some statutory number references. They made some language improvements, and they added some new language regarding respiratory restraints. Here's what that came down to. Oh, and by the way, I should have mentioned this a couple minutes ago. I tried to highlight some of these changes in the copies you got so that you'd kind of know where they were. That's not necessarily an easy process to do, but I tried to do that. So, so as you recall in our conversations about the carotid hold or the choke holds or different things like that, when we made our first changes, we included not only blocking the flow of blood, but also blocking the flow of air in our policy language. And so basically Lexipol is catching up to us now. And so they first addressed the flow of blood, which is what the carotid hold is intended to do. And now they've added language regarding respiratory restraints, which would basically says you also can't block the flow of air. Which is what, from our perspective, that's part of what we were talking about from the very beginning. So even though we already had language that covered that, we went ahead and accepted that update. And so you'll see in that policy just a new section that talks about respiratory restraints. So it's a bit of redundancy, but I felt it was important to have in there. So any questions on that one?
My only question, Chief, was why it seemed repetitive, and you explained that, because
yep.
I saw air and blood in 300.3.5, and then we had this new one that just talked about air. So
yeah, and that's one subject. I think it's generally we try to avoid repetitiveness because it can lead to confusion, but in this instance, it doesn't. And I think it's important to very clearly and strongly state our position that we're not going to do that, either one of them. So, okay, 307, vehicle pursuits. So this was not a Lexipol policy update. This was generated through the police department and updated by staff. So the sergeants and the captains and I worked in concert to create some better language and worked on this update. The sergeants were having conversations with the officers about challenges they were having with some of the language. So it really was kind of more of a grassroots update through the department. We also included City Attorney Josh Soper and that was actually, this document was one of the things we needed to amend on your packet. And so I think it says there on the amended version that we included City Attorney Josh Soper. He and I were a little bit challenged getting together, and we were finally able to first thing this morning to go through it. So that's why there was that amendment made last minute, and I apologize for that. But so city attorney's been involved. Vehicle pursuits are obviously a significant area of liability and risk across the board. So it was important for me to make sure that we had our city attorney review this as well. And so it basically talks about the language that we changed, talks about when to initiate a pursuit, when we'll terminate a pursuit, and who can exercise control over pursuits. As it says, in short, the updates make the policy more restrictive and add additional control and clarity. So I'll give you an example. The policy, if you happen to have read it before, or older versions, you would have seen the word generally used an awful lot. And so when it says generally officers should or should not do this, that's not very clear, right? Well, what does generally mean? Well, in some situations they're not, and the officers were having problems understanding, what exactly does that mean? And so we, for the most part, I think we eliminated every use of the word generally and provided more specific language and replaced the word should with shall. So it would, in several places, it said officers should not. Well, so to me, that means, you shouldn't do this, but it's not restricted. Like, if your parents told you, well, what's the curfew? Well, you shouldn't be out past 11. But if I am, it's not against the rules, right? And so when we're talking about something with this kind of risk and liability, we need to be crystal clear. The officers wanted that clarity, so we replaced should with shall in those instances where we were talking about what we want you to do and what we don't want you to do. So instead of saying officers should take these following actions, we would say officers shall take these following actions. So there's no more ambiguity. It's just very clear. Officers should not pursue in these circumstances. It's now going to read officers shall not pursue in these circumstances. So that's now the updated, I apologize, the updated version of that policy that you got in your amended packet doesn't have the highlight in it. I didn't have a chance to go through that. If you want me to, I am prepared to go through in more detail on what some of those changes were, but I'll leave that up to you. If you've read through that and you guys are comfortable and don't have any questions, that's fine. Thoughts?
Well, Chief, this reminds me of something that I mentioned in our board member discussion a couple months ago, and that was the incident just before Christmas. Maybe it was right after Thanksgiving, where Clackamas County was pursuing a car that came onto Main, and that's where it passed me. And as we were heading home, we saw two of Sherwood's finest heading in, not red light and siren or anything. Just, it was odd to see two of them going together through downtown the way they were. And so I figured something was up, and sure enough, and what you explained to us is that when I shared that, was that you as a department didn't pursue, but the word didn't get to the deputy sheriff from Clackamas County to chase the guy through town, and he hit somebody, he hit a car, and then he wrecked himself. So based on that, seeing that and you explaining, I think clarity is really important, but my question comes back to when another agency, not department, is in your jurisdiction, especially when it's not even, this was Clackamas County, not Washington County. What's the situation there? They're gonna do their own thing and have their own liability. Is that the bottom line?
So thank you for referencing that, Chris. That incident, frankly, was the flashpoint for the work on this chapter. So In discussing that incident and reviewing it from the officer level all the way through to my level, we discovered that there was need for more clarity on exactly what the officers could and couldn't do. They knew that they did not want to engage in, become involved in the pursuit. There was no question about that. There was complete clarity about that. What they weren't sure about is whether or not they had the authority to tell Clackamas County to not pursue, because they were coming into Old Town, a populated area on a Saturday morning. So of course we told them, yeah, you do have that authority, but as we started looking into the policy, we realized that's one area where it just wasn't clear and we needed to add clarity. So I will direct you to your copy of the policy, and it's 307 again, and you need to go to on a copy I have, it's page 8. That may or may not be right. It's probably right, but you need to go to section 307.6.2, pursuits extending into this jurisdiction. And I will tell you that the clarity that we added is the first paragraph that starts with "in the event that a pursuit." So that's pretty much new language. And we made that very clear in there that anytime anybody, a supervisor, any officer on duty shall exercise control of the pursuit because it's now in Sherwood. And our position is, we don't care who's chasing it. If it's in our jurisdiction, it's impacting our community and we're going to exercise control. Now, keep in mind that that doesn't mean that other agencies have to do what we ask them to, right? I mean, we can say, you need to terminate that pursuit, and they can say, good for you, and keep going. But here's what's important. Our community knows that we're looking out for them, and we're going to exercise control. And if somebody doesn't follow our guidance and something bad happens, at a minimum, our community knows that we did what we could to try to keep things, protect them and take care of them. On the bigger spectrum, it eliminates our liability because we got on the radio and made it very clear, you guys are coming into a congested area, you need to terminate. And so you'll see the language there that says, shall request the pursuit be terminated anytime it is determined the risks of continuing outweighs the need for capture, which is a consistent theme in our policy. At any point, the risks of continuing the pursuit outweigh the need for immediate capture. We're shutting it down. We're stopping. So that's really a key component there. And then there were some other tweaks in there to, like I said, add clarity, but that's really the main point, reference your scenario. So that's one significant area that we cleaned up. So any other questions about that chapter? And if not, that's fine. I would just encourage you to read through it so you would know now the position we're taking.
I had a quick question, if you can hear me.
I can, Brian. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to ask about, I've got a hybrid car, and my car has a noise that the government required in these vehicles just so you can hear them because they're so quiet. I was wondering about the guidance given in terms of when you're in a pursuit and you don't want to have your siren wailing. Is there a requirement that there be lights on? I mean, if you're going through areas where there may be people or runners or joggers, just for awareness purposes, what is the guidance given to officers in those situations where they don't want to sort of announce that they're coming through?
So I was trying to find some specific language, but so our policy, it sounds like you're kind of combining two different things. So we're talking about pursuits, vehicle pursuits, meaning we're chasing another car. That's different than emergency response, where we're going to an emergency scene, and you can consider that a pursuit and we would be pursuing time, right? So we're trying to get to a scene as fast as we can by using lights and sirens, as opposed to we're trying to catch a bad guy using lights and sirens. So let's talk about vehicle pursuits first. When we're chasing somebody, we must have lights and sirens on. So that's required by our policy. And in fact, motorcycles are directed to, if a pursuit begins with a motorcycle, they're directed to get out of the pursuit as soon as somebody else gets there. And more importantly, let me find the section so I can get you to the exact language. That's going to take me a second. I apologize. Let me find it here. .307.3.2 vehicles without overhead light bars. So that section basically says that if you're driving an unmarked vehicle, so in other words, the vehicle I drive, the vehicle the captain's drive or our detectives drive, they have lights and sirens, but they're inside. They're not on a light bar across the top of the car on the outside. Those vehicles, and they don't have painting and markings, those vehicles are prohibited from pursuing another car unless there's a immediate threat to human life. In other words, somebody's life is in danger, and if we don't get on this right now, somebody could die. Or there's some other crazy circumstance and they're authorized by a supervisor. But you're talking about a 99% rule here where you are not going to pursue without those. So to answer your question, no, we will never chase a bad guy without both lights and sirens operating. It's outside of our policy, and frankly, it would be against the law because the statute that allows us to drive in an emergency fashion requires us to have emergency lights and sirens. Now, when we're racing, or not racing, but when we're driving fast to an emergency scene, there could be situations and circumstances where we want to get there quietly so that we don't tip off the bad guy. Extremely rare, but it could be a silent alarm where somebody has an intruder in their home and they're hiding in the bathroom. Say it's the middle of the night and they hear somebody in their home downstairs or hiding in the bathroom. That may be an example where we're trying to get there quietly so that we don't create, by announcing our presence, we don't create a hostage situation. A bank, a silent hold up alarm at a bank might be another scenario where we try to get there quietly so that we don't force the suspect into feeling trapped in some kind of a hostage situation. So there may be circumstances with emergency response where we may go with lights only. When we do that, we're going to operate the car differently. We don't have the authority in those situations to run red lights and to drive in the same way as we would if we had both lights and sirens. And in fact, we train people to drive completely different if they don't have their siren on. The siren is really the huge component here because it's obviously the audible alert that an emergency vehicle is approaching. I think more people miss the lights than miss the siren, right? It's just doesn't happen. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you very much.
Chris, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Chief. Now, I remember you, and this is following up to the 307.3.2. And if I remember right, this last fall, you were on 99 and somebody whipped at you or something and you pursued them and you pulled them over. If they had taken off, you would have had to rely on somebody else picking them up, right? Is that what you're saying with this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. In my vehicle, which is unmarked, it has lights and sirens, so I can legally initiate traffic stops, and by this policy, can initiate traffic stops. But if they take off and try to evade me, I'm not chasing them in my car because I'm prohibited by policy. Again, unless there's, I don't have a copy of that brand new amended policy in front of me, just because I didn't have a chance to print it off today. But well, I've been working from home, but that's a whole nother story. But anyway, but if you read that section in your new, the policy that you have in front of you, you'll see the specific language that says there's got to be immediate threat to human life in order to pursue with an unmarked car.
So, Chief, like an Amber Alert, where you know that the car may contain the victim. Is that an example?
Yeah, that would be a good example. If you have an Amber Alert, which by Oregon standards, there has to be a very clear documented threat of harm to the child in order to get to an Amber Alert. We have very stringent requirements in Oregon before we'll issue an Amber Alert. We don't take them lightly. And so if an Amber Alert is issued, there's a safe assumption that there's a risk to the child, and that would be a scenario that might preclude that restriction and allow, there could be other circumstances. Obviously they're incident specific, but that would authorize somebody in an unmarked car to pursue the suspect vehicle. But then the other consideration comes into play is that there's a child in the car now, right? And so if it's a high-speed pursuit, you're now, there's risks that are involved with that, and you're now placing that child at risk. So that's why I say there's what people, I know you guys understand as we go through these policies, and hopefully our community understands, is that it's never simple. And so even when you take something that you would think would seem pretty simple, like a child's been abducted, they're in danger, we're going to chase this person down. Well, the other side of that is there's a child in that car. It's not just the bad guy. So that comes into play as well. So everything is incident specific and circumstance specific. As they say, the devil's in the details. And so this is what our officers and our supervisors are this is the information they're constantly weighing and considering, and to make the decisions that they need to make. And not only vehicle pursuits, but in, tactical incidents, use of force incidents, all these situations, which again, as you consider that, the literally hundreds in a week, over the course of a year, thousands, and then you can get to thousands upon thousands and so on, tens of thousands of those kinds of decisions that are made by officers. And the vast majority of the time, things go absolutely spot on right. Which is not to say that our profession is perfect, but it certainly gets it right an awful lot of the time. Any other questions about vehicle pursuits? Okay, so the next one after that, those are good questions, thank you, is 431, medical aid and response. This was the Lexapol update. They added some language regarding the administration of opioid overdose medication, what we call Narcan. There may be other products out there, but we utilize Narcan. And it's when somebody has overdosed on an opioid product, we can reverse that overdose with Narcan. We call those saves. And we've actually had several here in Sherwood, pretty neat. And then it also clarifies the requirement to provide first aid training. So just kind of some simple cleanup language on that one, or additional language on that one. Any questions there? Okay, chapter 600, investigation and prosecution. Those are just, as it says, statutory corrections. numbering, updating the numbers. 806 protected information, same thing, as was 1018 fitness for duty. Those all needed ORS numbers updated. Any questions about those last three or any of the other updates? Okay, very good. So, Chair, what I would ask is for any discussion and then for the board to entertain a motion and formal approval of these policy updates so I can take them to City Council.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anybody have any further discussion before we move to accept these updates?
I move that we accept the updates as presented.
I second.
I second.
Great. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great, then we can move forward with those, or you can move forward with those, Chief. Thanks.
Thank you.
And so it looks like for the next item, we have the traffic safety update. Mike or Chris?
Go, Mike.
Oh, Mike, had a good meeting. Part of the meeting this last time was a presentation on capital improvement projects. There was some discussion about what a capital improvement project is, and many of the things that we've been recommending or have been recommended to us actually fall under the province of a capital improvement project, which takes it away from our committee, which is good. Had a number of issues. A lot of issues that we deal with had to do with street parking. So, and I saw the chief twitch on that one. I'm sure that's just a joy for his officers. So a number of the ones we discussed were regarding street parkings in various areas. One of the topics that we discussed was some issues on Meineke with vision coming across a walkway that cars couldn't see other vehicles coming along Meineke. So that's being worked on as well. Chris, anything from you?
No, I just add more on the having an understanding of the capital improvement process that the city goes through was very helpful, because some of the challenges that have been put before us are big expenditure deals. Some of the stuff on Sunset, and they were, maybe with our input and based on community submissions, it gives staff some added information when they put forward those capital improvement recommendations to City Council. So that helped. Early on, we were being told, well, that's in the capital improvement. Well, we didn't really have an understanding, but it was very helpful for me, and I think we'll be able to understand the challenges that the staff has when they're putting that stuff together and trying to solve real problems that are coming to us. So.
Great.
And I would add, last thing I would add is that in the end of June, there may be an opportunity for one or two of you to experience the challenges and fulfillment of being on the Traffic Safety Committee.
Are you two already coming up on your year on that committee?
Yes.
That went by fast. Maybe not for you, but for us.
Yeah, that's a good reminder. It's actually over a year, but because of COVID, the committee didn't get started immediately when it was formed. So it was formed right before COVID, poor folks. And then it was like they were all ready to go. Oh, sorry, we can't, so. So yeah, that's a good reminder. Effective, in our July meeting, probably we'll need to decide who those reps are going to be, as well as you'll need to decide on your chair and vice chair for the next year.
Okay, great. Thank you, guys. Counselor Young, do you have any updates for us?
Not too much. Council was supposed to have a goal setting session this Saturday, but it's been canceled because our consultant lives in Texas. So there's no flights out for him to get here. So we will be rescheduling that. We're going to have an upcoming work session sometime in April to talk about the Woodhaven Residential Parking District. So if you know, around the old high school, there's permit parking to keep high school students from parking in front of everybody's houses. Well, that's not really needed anymore. So I'm sure that's the discussion we're going to have about getting those signs removed, would be my guess. At our last meeting we had this week, we had a work session at the end with Representative Neron, and she just was going over what she's working on this legislative session. But I thought this time I would tell you, as counselors, we all, besides city council, we all have other appointments, one of them being police advisory board for me, but also one of them, I sit on the Washington County Policy Advisory Board for Community Development Block Grant. And that's one counselor or staff member from every city in Washington County. And what that Policy Advisory Board does is we get federal funding and we take applications to determine how to divvy up that funding. And the applicants, the monies can go for public services, public facilities, infrastructure, and home projects. And I just thought I'd give you a little bit of update on this last policy, or this last application process. So we get the applications, and then all the applicants actually have to come do a presentation of their project to us, which was via Zoom this year. Normally it's in person. And then all of us board members evaluate the applications all on our own, and then all the scores are tabulated to determine the ranking order. And so just an idea of what those monies are going for this upcoming fiscal year. We're giving money to Community Action for eviction court prevention. So to help those that are facing eviction get some help in court. The Forest Grove Foundation, it's a coalition on rural homelessness. So out in the rural areas like Forest Grove and Cornelius, they don't have a lot of homelessness help. So there's a new group that's going to be starting to help with some advocacy out there. And then the Good Neighbor Center over in Tigard, they're going to get some funds for a program they're working on called Work to Housing, where they help their residents get training, whether in the medical field or the trades or union apprenticeship programs, so that once they're out of the Good Neighbor Center, which they're being housed because they were homeless, and get into permanent housing, they have a stable job to help them stay afloat. And then also some money is going to the St. Vincent's de Paul, St. Anthony's, which they use that money for rent and utility assistance for those that are needing help. We also are funding 2 home projects this year for some affordable housing projects, one in Tigard, which will be for seniors, and one in Tualatin, which is a pretty large project. I want to say it's like 392 units for affordable housing. And on those units, there's usually a certain amount of people that get in who are 30% of the average income levels, and some are 60%. So there's a specific number of housing units based on income level. And then we did some infrastructure funding to the city of Banks and the city of Cornelius for some projects they have going. So I just thought I'd give you a glimpse on some other things that we do on council besides just council stuff. We all serve on some county boards as well. That keeps us busy, but those are worthy projects given especially the COVID situation and people, not having rent and utilities. So it was a very strenuous evaluation process this year because there's not enough money. Like just in that first public services, sorry, I'm looking at my other computer, there's 4 applicants that didn't get funded, and most of those fundings was also for homelessness and rent and utilities and things like that. So that is all I have for tonight, unless anybody has any questions.
Looks like maybe Ralph has a question.
I don't have a question for you directly, Kim. Thank you. But it's time for me to make an exit stage left. So thank you to everybody. Thanks for putting up with me being way over here. I will see you next month. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Ralph.
Bring us macadamia nuts.
Do what? Bring you macadamia nuts.
Chocolate covered.
Chocolate
Chocolate covered. for sure.
Okay. Okay. Bye-bye.
All right.
Anybody have any questions for Counselor Young? Okay, then we'll move on to staff report, Chief.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. I feel like I've talked enough tonight. Use of force discussion you see is the first there. What I would ask of the board is to begin conversations with your friends and neighbors and fellow community members on kind of what they envision or what thoughts they have about use of force. I'll use the word expectations. We have done this before, and when I say we, you all have done this before with regard to, let me see if I can, there we go. We have done this before with service levels and marijuana and lots of different things. So I'm really looking for the same types of conversations, and I'm going to leave it fairly open at this point, but at some point we may get more specific, and it's really kind of about how does the community feel about situations where we may de-escalate or disengage, right? We talked about that a little bit earlier, but there's generally a flip side to most any time we choose to use a de-escalation tactic, and it may involve the person walking or the person running. And those are conversations I think we need to have, because how does our community feel about that, right? So it's not that I'm trying to let the community dictate right or wrong per se, but I think it's an important conversation and dialogue to have. If somebody's in a mental health crisis and they're not presenting a danger to an immediate danger or threat to somebody else, and we look at it and say, okay, maybe since we can't safely take them into custody, certainly we're going to try to, but if that becomes a challenge, what if we let them walk away and try to address it in a different way? That may not be the best example because we have lots of resources to deal with that, but I think you get my point. I think it's important to have some conversation with the community about this as we're having these conversations internally and as a department. And so I'm just looking for you all to have some of those conversations with your community members in the next couple of months, and let's see what ideas and thoughts people bring back. So that's that. Any questions? I hope that all made sense.
Looks like Lori has a question.
Yes, Lori has a question. And we've talked about this before, Chief. This has always been one of my biggest fears is I have a child who's on the spectrum, and you're not necessarily going to recognize that he's on the spectrum unless you start trying to talk to him and interact with him just to see him moving along the street. There's nothing that says I'm different. So what kind of training is the agency getting as far as how to recognize people who are different, who maybe don't process the same way, can't respond the same way, don't understand the same way? What are we proactively doing? Because I see that being a big issue. And like I said, it is just absolutely my biggest fear is that he's going to run across somebody who's not going to get it, and he's going to expect him to act like a typical person would expect, and he can't do it.
So I think one of the first things we need to clarify is that we're training our police officers, I think across the state, but certainly in Sherwood, that there is no normal response, right? So if you approach somebody and you have some expectation of how they should respond to you, you're probably going to be disappointed. because in any situation, they're likely going to respond to you in a way that you don't expect. And that should be what we expect. So that's number one. Number two, the CIT training we have, the training that we have provided for, I don't know, a few years now at least. And it's being more widespread distributed. In other words, more officers through the department are receiving the training, and in fact receiving high, advanced levels of the training. When we talk about how to respond to people from a mental health perspective, we don't identify what that means. So it covers all forms of abilities, disabilities, challenges, behaviors, all of that. And it would certainly include somebody that's like your son, that's on the spectrum, who's not going to respond potentially like somebody else, right? And I'm not going to say respond normally, because to him, it may be a normal response, right? And so we're training people to understand that if they react very loud and aggressively, that may in fact be their normal response. And so then we need to try to respond to them in a way that's going to get them out of that response and help them to understand that they're in a safe situation. Other people that are in some kind of mental health crisis, and we've talked about, or we do talk about, I don't remember that we've talked specifically here, but so I'll mention it, is that it's important to understand that a mental health crisis is a definition that covers all kinds of scenarios. It may cover somebody that has a diagnosed condition that affects their mental health, schizophrenia, bipolar, whatever the case may be, or so something we would refer to as chronic, or something that we would refer to as more acute, that it's brought on by some series of events, or some trauma, or some substance, or lack of substance, or whatever the case may be. And so we approach that training from this broad perspective that says, here's how you deal with, how you communicate with folks that are in that kind of a situation, in some kind of a mental health crisis. Now, it may not be fair to describe an interaction with somebody like your son as a crisis. They may not necessarily be in a crisis, but it's inclusive of that, because when an officer responds to him, as you said, he may not respond in what would be an expected manner. And so that training covers that. So there's never too much of that training. And I think what we're doing is trying to include as much of that as we can. The other part of it is we're not going to rush in. What we're also training on is we're going to slow down, right? We're not going to rush into a situation. And our number one concern isn't going to be to get somebody in handcuffs and stuff them in the back of a car. We're not going to be looking for victory at every turn. So if we get into a situation and there's a communication breakdown for one reason or another, we're going to slow down and figure out, okay, how do we need to approach this? And unless somebody's life is in immediate danger, we probably don't need to take any fast action. And so we can try to diffuse this, get maybe, if we need to, the mental health response team there to help us. Maybe we need to walk away and not worry about it if it doesn't warrant further investigation, or maybe we need to change our tactics. And it may very well be that we just need to step back and not do anything. And if we feel it's a situation that needs to be contained in some way, then we'll just contain it, but we don't need to take any forward action. And we just kind of call a timeout and a pause. So those are the conversations and the trainings that we're moving into. It's constantly evolving, it's constantly progressing. So to answer your question, has it happened? Yes. Are we continuing to improve with more training in that realm? Yes, we are. Sadly, the mental health situation has changed dynamically in just my career, right? So my 30 plus years may seem like a long time to me, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not a very big window. And I can tell you there's been dramatic changes in my career in the mental health arena. I think I've mentioned to this board, if certainly to others, when I started as a police officer, we rarely, if ever, went on these types of calls. They were not our responsibility. And we have changed and progressed to a point where we are the first responder at almost every one of them. And so as a result, we've had to develop and locate training to deal with that. So it's constantly evolving and constantly improving. But yes, it is being addressed, and it is something that we're looking into. We just had from our Lexipol, our policy provider Lexipol, sent out just a tip just within the last couple of days on dealing with somebody on the spectrum and what to expect and what not to expect. That's like a 3-minute little video tip, but it's indicative of the communication and the training that's and the information that's out there. So that's kind of a long answer because I think it's a really important topic, but hopefully that answers your question. You're muted still.
Yeah, it does address some of it. It is a very complex, convoluted topic because you mentioned you got a 3-minute snippet about how to deal with someone who's on the spectrum. Well, there's a saying that if you've met one person on the spectrum, you've met one person on the spectrum because they're all so different. You know, so many different things that you can run across. And I'm just, as I sit here, I try to come up with ways. How can we as people become more familiar with some of the things that you know people with differences struggle with on a day-to-day basis. And one thing that just occurred to me, and you know, I'm just thinking on the fly here, is do the officers ever get to go spend, you know, immerse themselves in a quantity of time with a number of people like this? Like, do they maybe get to go spend some time in the facilities where there are a number of people just learning how to, you know, introduce themselves, who are sort of trying to go from maybe mom and dad's house out to independent living, and there are these group homes. Do they ever get involved in things like that so that they can see how people function, how different things affect them? How, I mean, you've got a broad range of officers' presentations. Some of them come across as much more friendly. Some of them come across as much more authoritative. And I can tell you that the authoritative ones are not going to, they're not going to interact as, they're not going to get as positive of a response from my son as the ones who are more friendly. That's one of the things that we learned very early with my son, is if you want him to do something, you don't tell him sternly. You talk to him in a sing-song voice. You use inflection. You don't be monotone, and you don't be authoritative. And I'm wondering if that kind of element is being introduced into this, because it's just so much more than you can get in just, you know, a few hours. I mean, you've got to spend the time, you've got to experience these things to really get a good feel for them. And that's even with the people that you're being exposed to, because they're all so different.
Yeah, so this is going to be a difficult answer because it's not going to be one that feels good to you, and I understand that. But I'm obviously, you know me well enough to know that I'm going to be completely honest. And the answer is no, we don't do that. And the challenge is we can't do that because we don't have the time to address those types of issues. And there's multiple issues that would be equally and are equally as important. We can't address from a time perspective all of them that way. And so there's times when we can pick and choose different issues. But if you talk to people, like I'm sure, you know, you can testify to, and other parents of children on the spectrum, they will tell you that it probably took them a matter of years to really find out, and maybe family counseling to identify how to deal with their child and how to be effective with their child. And we just don't, that's a challenge for us in policing, because how do we do that with every scenario and every unique mental health kind of condition, right? So the clinicians that ride with the officers on the mental health response team, they're master level clinicians. And so those are the people that we try to introduce into some of these difficult challenges. And we just, it's just very difficult for us to expect that level of expertise and that level of training for police officers when there's so much that we have to be responsible for to train. And so again, I know that's not a feel-good answer. I know that's not the answer you want, but that's the challenge we have. Because for all the challenges that we want folks to be ready for, officers to be ready for, to deal with individuals on the spectrum, we also want them to be ready to deal with people that are in a different type of mental health crisis and to know how to respond to that one. So then, okay, so now there's potentially multiple days and hours of training that goes into that. We also want them to know how to defuse a domestic disturbance. We also want them to know how to investigate a sexual assault from a trauma-informed perspective. So there's more hours. We also want them to know how to, right? And so that's not an excuse, it's the challenge that we have. And I agree with the point that you kind of made, that this is as much a societal problem, an issue that needs to be addressed, as it is a policing issue that needs to be addressed. The services aren't there, the awareness isn't there, and we get far too many calls, or we are called to far too many situations that we probably shouldn't be called to. But as soon as it turns into some kind of a crisis, people pick up the phone and call 911. Because who else are they going to call? And it's been suggested, well, here's some other numbers to call instead. And I can't remember where it was I saw that, but it was kind of a movement that said, don't call the police, call these numbers. Well, here's the problem. If you call those numbers and it's a crisis, somebody's acting out, those folks aren't going to show up.
Right.
They're going to tell you, call the police, and then we'll follow up once everything is safe and once everything is calmed down. And so then we end up there, and it's a big challenge for us. And we're trying to, deal with it and respond in the best way we can. And until we get an answer to what kind of level, what kind of training level, what kind of issue we have, I think the best response for us is to say, okay, we need to slow down in some of these. And which takes me back to the conversations I want you all to have as a board with the community, your friends and neighbors and stuff, is that if we slow down and we determine, okay, this person is in some kind of mental health crisis and they're really not threatening anybody else. They may have a knife and they may be threatening to hurt themselves. What if we just let them go? What's going to happen, right? We're going to have to weigh that based on the incident and the circumstances. But what if we let them go? What is the community, specifically, how is Sherwood going to feel about that? If we go to a situation where somebody in the spectrum is in a convenience store and something has caused them to act out, and I don't know if that's the right terminology, but they're acting, and somebody calls us and says, hey, I need you to come and get this person out of the store. And so we get there, and hypothetically, the person now has made their way out to the sidewalk. Okay. And there's a small crowd that's kind of watching, and so, well, what if we just say, okay, they're not in the store, we're out of here, right? Is the community going to be like, yeah, that's the right spot, or do they have different expectations that we need to address? Because you know as well as I do, in that situation, if we try to force the issue, it's not going to end well. Mm-hmm. We're just going to feed into the person's challenge. And so anyway, this is a great big heavy basket that we've got to lift and we've got to process through when it comes to mental health. And I think we're doing as good as we possibly can. And there's a lot of improvements that need to be made. And I'll be the first but I think the place where policing needs to change their thinking and improve first and foremost is in a lot of these situations, we need to just slow down and think about why does this need to end in handcuffs right now? Maybe it ends in handcuffs 2 hours from now or tomorrow. Maybe we just let the person go and we follow them down the street. Maybe you know what I mean? So I think that's number one for us is we've just got to slow down. And quite frankly, if we trained ourselves to slow down in general, I think we'd be solving a lot of our problems as well. A lot of our disparate contact problems, a lot of our disproportionate arrest problems with people of color. I think we'd solve a lot of problems if we just start thinking about policing in terms of we just need to slow down here. Do I really need to get to the bottom of this? Do I really need to prove a point here? Am I responding because I'm being challenged personally or because I have to respond and make an arrest? So I hope that helps at least to some degree.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Brian, did you have a question? It looked like you were getting ready to ask a question at some point.
Oh, I was just going to say, perhaps that could be something that was brought up in one of the meetings. You could have someone come in and give a little talk. I've had the honor of doing that for the SPD, and it's been a fabulous conversation was had, and it was really helpful to both the community and to the police department. So that may be an opportunity there.
Could be. Thank you. Chris.
You know, this discussion reminded me of the last 2 nights on KGW and the big issue of Fred Meyer having to throw away food and the public outraged, and Fred Meyer called the Portland's finest. And there's just a no-win situation, but you don't want people to get sick. And there's liabilities all around. And I just, it's another one of those scenarios, Chief, that I can't see a win situation, but you got public safety involved.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm trying to, I'm obviously being very guarded and intentional with my words, but because I don't want to send the wrong message, but it's pretty hard to imagine that we would spend resources protecting garbage, something that's been discarded, right? So on any given day, there's all kinds of things in dumpsters that could hurt people. And people have been dumpster diving as long as certainly longer than I've been in this job. People have been dumpster diving. In fact, popular media, television shows and everything, you know, make light of it. So, but you're right, very challenging situation, and certainly not something that I would want to have to allow to turn into anything that would imply pit police officers against the community, not to protect garbage. So not second guessing, wasn't there. Glad that that's not something that I'd have to deal with, but you make a very good point about that. There are times when we're put in untenable situations.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other comments or questions on the use of force conversation? So again, no rush on that. Just I would just ask that you just start those casual conversations. A vaccination update. I think we're pretty much done. with our vaccinations, those that wanted it, I think have gotten both series. I will tell you that after the second series, there were multiple members of the department that had to take some time to recover, yours truly included. I got mine Tuesday morning, very happy to this point, feel very fortunate and blessed to have been able to receive the vaccination. But yesterday was a miserable day as a result. So it kicked in for me middle of the night, Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. And so I guess they say what I kept telling people, I guess they say no pain, no gain. So a couple of days of going through some bodily reactions to the vaccination are certainly worth the benefit of being vaccinated in my mind. So anyway, but the good news is I think we've got that taken care of. Hiring update. We had 2 positions. We hired the second of our 2 reserves, Paul Matson. His first day is next Monday. He's a recruit police officer, so he's scheduled to go to the police academy on February 22nd is his first day, Monday. Middle of March, I think, is when his police academy date starts. So they are putting academy classes together as need be. So that's good. We have 1 position left that's still vacant, and we don't have any other qualified candidates. So we're starting over again, and we've opened a recruitment you may have seen on Facebook for lateral police applicants. So if you know of anybody or somebody who knows somebody that is a police officer currently somewhere and wants to go to work for one of the best agencies in the world, I was going to say state, but I thought, why stop there? So we would certainly love to see their application. I think our pay and benefits are competitive, and it's more than that, it's a great community to work for and in. So pass the word as much as you can, and that's all I've got.
Any questions for the chief before we move on? No? Angie, did we have any citizen comments this time?
We do not.
Okay. Any further discussion before we move to adjourn? Is there a motion to move to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I second.
Hi.
All right. Do we need to vote on that, chief, or can we just adjourn?
Good night.
That one does not require a vote.
Okay, everybody, thank you so much for your time.